I'm Barry Bernasconi, work for Marsh here in Australia, an insurance broker. I've been with them for almost 20 years now. I'm a managing director in Australia on our executive, and for the last 10 years I've been heading up our education practice in Australia. It goes back a long way, well before my time, so even back to the inception of Unimutual back in, I think it was 1989. Marsh were involved way back then, and UTAS, which is still our client now, they're a founding member of Unimutual, so the engagement's been going for a very long time, much longer than I've been around. But it's an excellent relationship. Key thing for us is that we put a lot of focus on industry expertise. So when you look at what Unimutual stands for, it's owned by the members for the members in that space. So you're not dealing with generalists. Everything we're talking about is focused on the higher education sector. So I think that's massively important for the clients that are in Unimutual. It's massively complicated. So you look at a university, you've got global international risks, you're sort of a mini conglomerate. You've got faculties that are producing stuff, you've got medical divisions, and you've got engineering divisions, people flying drones. So that's the sort of fascination for me, is the complexity of stuff that's in there. So every two universities are not the same, every day isn't the same, and even just trying to get the business description right for an insurer to say, now what do they do? Insurers rely on that. And you kind of want to say, well, they do everything. You see some of the weird and wonderful things come out, from some performing arts and what they try and do with people, and hanging them from sculptures to people digging 2 kilometre deep holes in the middle of a university. So this being part of that forefront of technological advancement brings new risk. Well, the big thing at the moment is the sort of discussion around a transitioning or a hardening market, and yes, premiums are getting more expensive. The cost of risk transfer is getting more expensive, but that's been coming for a couple of years now. We've known about that, and we sort of talk about the insurance markets recovering back to the prices that were there a few years ago. So whilst that's happening, I wouldn't say it's necessarily unexpected. When you have a look at the losses though, that's where stuff is changing. There's 2 big components there. One is climate change, so all these big weather events are happening more and more often. Look at the hurricane season last year with 3 major hurricanes in pretty close succession as well. So climate events are happening more often, so I think the sort of redefining what the probability of those events is going to be critical. And the other big thing is, still, we keep talking about cyber, but just the Internet of Things, the connectiveness of everything. And think about where we're going to be in 5 to 10 years' time, and how everything we do is going to depend on technology and connectivity. That's going to be a huge risk for us. I don't think we yet fully understand and embrace what that's going to mean. A lot of what we do is predicated on past and history. And the insurance industry is great at looking back and saying, this is what actually happened, this is what went wrong, so therefore this is how we'll plan the future. In the cyber and AI sphere, it's all new, there is no history. So you're sort of trying to keep up as you go along. That's going to be the challenge that I see there. You get a lot of really smart people, which universities have, and you run a lot of models. So that sort of quantitative modelling aspect, big data, is key to all of this. There's fantastic opportunity, but the risk piece is the piece we don't really know until we get there and someone goes, oh, wow, how did that manifest and what do we do with it now? So that's going to be the exciting piece. Huge opportunity, but we don't know what the risk is yet, so you just got to keep pace all the time. And we've seen that in the development of cyber policies. From where they started sort of 3, 4, 5 years ago to what they are now, chalk and cheese. In the broking community, our role is to advocate for the client and to advise the client. So universities are no different. So we always start with a discussion based on risk. It's maybe a popular misconception that brokers are all about insurance. Insurance is the ultimate thing we get to for risk transfer, but the conversation always starts with risk and advice. And that's what our clients rely on us for. That's why we're there in partnership with Unimutual as well. So clients get advice from Unimutual, which is where the risk transfer actually sits, but they rely on us as well. And I think there's also an obligation on us to be need to challenge clients in their thinking about what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. But then also our job is to challenge Unimutual, and definitely Unimutual partner well with us as a broker, because where we're trying to change and improve wording, a lot of that comes from us, where we're trying to advocate for our clients, and that feeds into Unimutual for the benefit of all the universities. So it is a really good tripartite relationship, but the advisory component is really important in there. It's not a Marsh to the client to the university. It is truly the three together. And that's the only way it can truly succeed. You have to be in a true tripartite relationship. Intangible assets it's a huge area that hasn't properly been covered by the insurance world and risk management. It sort of sits by the side because it's not visible. It's not there, you can't touch it and feel it and move it. Reputation is a massive issue for any of the universities. And we talked a little bit about that in the sessions yesterday, just with you look at parents overseas who are Googling at a university and say, shall I send my child here? And depending on what they see, will define whether they say, actually Australia is a good place to send them, or particularly university is a good place, or actually I'm going to send my kids to Canada because I don't like what I see. So there's all of that management of the intangible that comes in there, and that directly feeds into obviously universities' income. And we all know about the challenges of funding in universities. So these are critical things that are completely intangible that we have to get right. We always use the analogy, you don't want to be sort of arm's length, and then the first time you interact with the risk protection provider and insurer is when there's a $20 million loss on the table. And it always comes down, when the claim eventually happens, as it does, that's when you get to see the value of that relationship. And the claims that run smoothly, where there's good engagement, losses are clearly defined quickly, is because of that relationship. Where you don't have that, that's when you start to get into some stickiness along the way. I think so. I think the unique value proposition of the mutual is it's a discretionary mutual. And some people sort of look at that word discretionary and take it as a negative. Definitely my engagement with Unimutual I've seen as a positive. It's the members who are in there on the claims panel who are sort of looking at these losses and saying, well, you've always got their head in, could it happen to me? It's not in the wording, but is there something that we should be looking at? So I think discretion is a really valuable piece in there, and that feeds directly into the claims. So to be able to get a settlement expedited, where maybe in the commercial insurance market you wouldn't be able to do that. So there's a huge amount of value in that alone. So owned by the members, for the members, has a particular value proposition. The key thing I'd always try and talk to all of our clients about is, you can't just price for today. So when you're looking at anything to do with risk and where you're spending your money, you have to take a long-term economic view of the impact of those decisions you're making today. So a lot of this, and I talked earlier about how the industry is very good at looking in the rearview mirror, but all the risk that we face is in the future. So we need to become better at actually looking at the long term and the volatility of risk that's coming. So the pricing exercise is kind of always the last thing we should be doing. And it is important. It's challenging in a market, an industry where funding is becoming harder and harder and harder. So it was clear yesterday the number one thing that the audience voted for in terms of top risk was funding. So when you're in this market and you go back to university and you might say, okay, there's going to be a 10% increase in premiums, or we'd like to deliver this service and it's going to cost you X. That gets weighed against a whole bunch of other cost considerations. But the uniqueness of what we're doing in the space, in the risk space and the insurance landscape, is the decisions we make today will impact us well into the future. So if you look at a liability policy, the claims aren't there for the last year or this year. The claims could be there for stuff that's going to happen in 7, it will manifest itself in 7 years' time, 8 years' time. You look at the collective knowledge that sits in those universities and the problems that we can solve, and even trying to relate that back to uninsurable risk. The use of big data and the collaboration that goes on, I'm sure we can solve a whole bunch of things. From a risk perspective, you look at the embracing artificial intelligence, embracing big data, and how that can remove risk from society, and it goes beyond just protecting the universities themselves. It's about the broader society. The research that's currently going on into helping to make countries fitter just through urban design. Those are really cool things, and that's risk for everyone. So we need to keep the funding, need to keep the research going on that stuff, but try and take the research and apply it to risk in general. So they're firmly linked into that risk space. It's good to see.